This week on Adventist News Network, planning outreach for London Summer Olympics.
A U.S. Supreme Court ruling defends church-state separation.
And Adventists celebrate 100 years of communication ministry.
These stories and more coming up.
This is Adventist News Network, a service of the Seventh-day Adventist World Church. Thanks for joining us this week.
First in the news, the Adventist Church in the United Kingdom is planning major outreach events during London's upcoming Summer Olympics. The city is expecting an influx of millions of people in July and August for the Games. To help prepare effective outreach, area Adventist leaders recently met at the church's Newbold College for an evangelism expo. They share ideas and resources for reaching the city of London for Jesus.
We cannot go through 2012 and miss the largest cultural party right on our doorstep, the London Olympics. Not all of us may be interested in sport, but we're ideally situated to make the most of this cultural celebration. I'm urging all our churches to be intentional in planning our outreach for July and August of this year. The cultural diversity of our church and the many languages that we speak are an important asset for witnessing during this period.
The South England Conference has been intentional in setting aside funds and time to focus our evangelism this year during the time of the Olympics. With health expos and health outreach combined with drama and musical productions to be aired in large venues, we are encouraging all our churches to get involved this year. Many of them are on the torch relay route that's happening leading up to the Olympics. We're praying to tell the story of Jesus Christ in this very secular part of the world. I'm Kirsten Lundqvist, reporting for SEC Media.
Adventist legal counselors say a recent ruling by the United States Supreme Court further protects church-state separation in the country. The nation's highest court ruled that government cannot question a religious community's employment decision. They backed up a Lutheran church school for firing a school teacher who the church said violated its doctrine of internal conflict resolution. This means churches in the U.S. are free to hire or fire pastors and teachers without worrying that a secular jury might question their motivation. The Adventist Church filed a friend of the court brief in the case and says it's pleased with the outcome.
An Adventist soprano recently performed for Albania's biggest musical event of the year. Irita Dragati-Matza sang the Lord's Prayer for the country's New Year's Eve gala concert. Church leaders in the region say sacred music is not often performed in secular concert halls, especially in post-communist countries like Albania. Dragati-Matza thanked God for the opportunity to witness at a secular concert broadcast widely on television and radio nationwide.
Hundreds of Adventist women from the South Pacific recently met for prayer and worship at the Samoan Seventh-day Adventist Women's Congress. Presenters included government and religious leaders, and attendees focused on community outreach. The Samoa Red Cross offered training in basic life-saving skills, and many church members rallied around the church's End It Now program. The global initiative seeks to eliminate domestic abuse against women and girls.
Adventist young people are impacting a community in southern Brazil. Caleb Mission Project members are offering haircuts, manicures, blood pressure checks, and craft classes for community members. The volunteer team is in Rio Grande do Sul for 2 weeks. The Caleb Mission Project leader says the group's work is making an impression on the community. He says the young people are impacting the lives of area families and that God is blessing their efforts.
The Adventist Development and Relief Agency says relief efforts in the Philippines are continuing a month after Tropical Storm Washi slammed the country. The storm hit in mid-December, meaning many families spent the holidays packed in shelters with hundreds of other people. ADRA Philippines has distributed rice and other emergency food supplies to thousands of displaced families. The agency is also providing safe drinking water.
The Adventist Church is celebrating 100 years of communication ministry this year. The denomination was established in 1863 But it wasn't until decades later that the church hired newspaper reporter Walter Bergen to help shape the church's image in the media by establishing a press bureau. Bergen worked tirelessly to get secular news coverage of church activities. He worked closely with the Associated Press and many newspapers and magazines, and even offered workshops and training guides so church employees could learn communication skills. Church administrators were quick to see the value of public relations, and today's church communication department grew out of Bergen's press bureau. I sat down with current World Church Communication Department Director Williams Costa Jr. to learn about the church's legacy of communication and where the ministry is headed today. Williams, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
100 years of church communication. What's the significance of 100 years of church communication?
People become scared to get old. But in our case, it's wonderful to be 100 years running communication for the World Church. But to me, the most important thing is not what we have been accomplished through these years, but the foundation that God gave to us for us to look to the future.
So how has communication changed in 100 years? What are we doing differently than we did back then?
Dramatically. At the end that we start with the communication department here, lots of media were being invented, like cinema, like the recording on audio. And all of these have been changed and have been reached people more and more. But dramatically, the change has been so dramatic on the last years. You can see the internet, the social network. It's incredible the possibilities that we have today on communication.
So now there are a lot more ways for people to communicate.
Absolutely. For you to communicate and for you to hear what people are saying. That's another important aspect on communication.
We look back at history and we see Walter Bergen and his real desire to influence the public. But does church communication have an important role for the church itself?
Absolutely, because if people know about things, they get inspired, they get motivated, and there's no misunderstanding. The same with the people outside the church. They do not have obligation to discover what we have in our minds. We need to inform them. And what is our duty? To say, well, we believe in this, we are going to do this, this is our realization. So communication is key for everything, for marriage, to raise children, to work for the church, and to have the gospel to all the world.
A lot of buzz in the media lately has been about the power that media, particularly social media, has given the people of different communities and countries to influence and change even their government structures. Does communication in the church context give church members a chance to influence mission and the direction of the church?
Absolutely. There is no doubt that the social media has empowered the individuals. And my dream is that people inspired by the Holy Spirit, having easy access to content, they can use these tools to share the good news of salvation, to testify, to inspire, and to motivate people. And I repeat these two words, inspiration and motivation, because those are key in the process of communication.
Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Up next, a local radio pastor's lifetime of achievement.
Welcome back. This week's issue of the Adventist Review highlights the remarkable life of a Washington, D.C. area radio pastor.
This week in Adventist Review, meet Terry Lyndon Johnson, a remarkable Seventh-day Adventist who is one of a handful of radio pastors in the USA, helping listeners of WGTS-FM in Washington, D.C. find Christ and hope. In second grade, teachers told Terry's mother he needed institutional care because he could not read. Instead, he went to a private school, overcame what was later diagnosed as profound dyslexia, and ended up as a member of the President's Honor Guard at the White House. Also, Emmanuel Millen takes us behind the scenes of Romans chapter 7 for a look at who the wretched man Paul talks about really is. All this and much more in this week's Adventist Review.
To expand mission to the cities, Adventist Mission is establishing urban centers of influence. Gary Krause explains how these community outreach hubs work.
Adventist prophet Ellen White said in 1902 that the Adventist church had neglected the cities. And in 1910 she said, this is the essential work of the church. But more than 100 years later, we have to admit that the Adventist church is largely a rural church, and the urban areas remain a huge mission challenge. The Office of Adventist Mission is trying to resurrect the concept of urban centers of influence. This is a concept Ellen White talked about, where there would be centers established all over the world in major cities that are connecting to human need. She said that it is through the social relations that Christianity comes in contact with the world. So these centers of influence will be in touch with the community, will survey the needs, find out what people are looking for, what answers they are looking for, what are their physical, their spiritual, their holistic needs. And these community centers, these centers of influence, will connect to those needs. To find out more information, go to adventistmission.org.
For our Adventist social media feature this week, Megan Bronner talks to Andrews University's Stephen Payne about using blogs and Facebook on an Adventist campus.
Today we're talking to Stephen Payne, who is the Vice President for Marketing Enrollment at Andrews University. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, Megan.
How are you today?
I'm great.
So can you tell us just a little bit about what you've been doing at Andrews with social media and what inspired you to get started in it?
News photography that I'm trying to do. Ultimately, I'll go to some events and kind of provide a live visual blog of what's going on there. But it's more just kind of little bits and things. You know, the sun was shining on Sunday instead of having a snowy day for registration. So, you know, it was putting up things like that. The thing that's been, I think, most rewarding about it is, especially within the last 6 months to a year, it has become more of a dialogue. You know, certainly I continue to do my thing in which I try to present a kind of a wide-ranging voice of Andrews. Sometimes it's just quotes as we get ready for Sabbath here. Sometimes it's a live blog of a chapel talk. Other times it's just a picture of the first flower in spring. So that's, you know, I think one thing that makes it, I hope, a little bit unusual and worth following. But the other part is to have students become part of the dialogue. You know, even if it's something like, is the bookstore open today? Or, you know, I live in Kenya, how can I become a student there?
Well, thank you so much for talking with us, Stephen.
It was great to talk with you about Facebook and more.
Thank you. Thanks for watching social media this week. And if you'd like, follow Andrews University on Facebook and Twitter.
While the recent Arab Spring signaled increased freedoms for some countries in the Middle East, the new governments it ushered in remain a concern for religious liberty advocates. John Grotz explains.
People were very impressed by the strong wind, the powerful wind of freedom, you know, in Arab countries. We saw that people dreaming about freedom. And they were successful. They changed the government. But what was the next step? The next step is now we have, in several countries, religious leaders in charge of the affairs of the country. And for us, who are defending religious freedom, every time we can see religion in power, religion making alliance with the government or the state, we are nervous because we know that it will lead to discrimination of those who are not sharing the same religion, the same ideal. It will lead to maybe persecutions and sometimes torture. This is why we believe that you have to make a separation between the church and state if you want to keep and to protect religious freedom. We hope that they will find a good balance in the Arabic countries, and we hope that religious minorities will not be persecuted by religious people. We have to reaffirm strongly that nobody should be arrested, discriminated, or persecuted for his or her religion. And we have to reaffirm that religious freedom, the freedom of choice, is God's gift for everyone and everywhere, including in the Arab countries.
Coming up, this week's Tech Corner.
So as I was reading this book, The Great Hope, this sentence really caught my attention. The simple, hardy people of the North turned from the corruption, the pomp, and the superstitions of Rome to welcome the purity, the simplicity, and the life-giving truths of the Bible. And that caught my attention and gave me hope because I'm just like those people. I am simple, I'm hardy, and I'm from the North. This is talking about Scandinavia, where my ancestors are from. And the exciting part is people's lives were changed. They totally turned from corruption to purity. The country changed. The world started changing. God changes people's lives. He's changed my life through the scripture.
Welcome back. For this week's Tech Corner, John Beckett explains how cell phone barcodes can help you share resources effectively.
Over the past year, you may have noticed strange-looking square barcodes coming up on everything from billboards to postcards. These barcodes are called QR codes, and they're used by companies to invite people with smartphones to visit a related website. The way it works is people with smartphones take pictures of the codes that instantly link them to a website address, a Facebook page, or shows a coupon on their screen. For church use, QR codes might be nice to include if you're getting ready to hand out a bunch of flyers, programs, or business cards at an event. That way, people can instantly scan them with their phone to learn more or to sign up. It's really easy to make QR codes. Just Google search for a QR code to find a lot of options. One site I like is goqr.me. A few final thoughts to consider about QR codes. First, they're supposed to make things easier for mobile users. Using them on a website is just silly since you could include a link rather than make people use a smartphone to scan the information off their screen. Second, make sure your website works well with mobile devices before linking to it with a QR code. Remember, people mostly use QR codes on their phones, not on their computers. Finally, use a URL shortening service like bit.ly.com to make your URLs shorter and codes more reliable, as well as gain some interesting usage tracking tools. I don't know if QR codes are a trend that will fade or will become part of everyday life, but for now, they're an interesting way to link offline to online.
With tax season approaching, many of you might be collecting financial data, but Peter Landless says there are some different numbers you should keep in mind.
It's the holiday season and we count down to Christmas, to New Year, to the time when we can be with family, to those holiday visits. All of them are wonderful. We look at numbers all the time. Do you know your numbers? Do you know what your weight is? Oh, horrors. Weight. Getting on that scale every day. Do you know that the research says that if you weigh every day, your chances of keeping your weight under control are so much better? Do you know what your weight is? Do you know what your blood pressure is? Blood pressures are so readily available. You can read them, you can switch them on yourself, you can get them done at a pharmacy. These little things pump up when you want them to and when you don't. But you can know your blood pressure numbers. Do you know what your sugar numbers are? Your blood sugar. That's very important. Things have changed. It used to be that More sugar was accepted as normal in the blood than there is today. The numbers vary in the part of the world you may find yourself in, but get your numbers checked. Your cholesterol, your high density, your low density, the good and the healthy, the bad and the ugly. Check them all. Know your numbers. You'll be so much happier this holiday season knowing them and practicing.
When we come back, this week's iShare report.
All I could see was my husband's body just sinking to the bottom. That day, I will never forget. And that prayer was the hardest prayer I've ever said in my life.
Welcome back. Let's turn to Sergio Gonzalez to find out what you reported this week.
Welcome to iShare, where you bring the news to us. This week, our reporter is a professor at Adventist-run Montemorelos University in Mexico. Harvey Alferez tells us about his technology-inspired ministry.
Hello, my report is about a blog called The Divine Engineer. It consists of weekly devotionals for Spanish-speaking Adventists who love technology. This project has two main objectives. First, to integrate faith and technology. Secondly, to encourage Adventist technologists to use their talents to support the Adventist mission. Up to date, this blog has had more than 3,000 views from visitors in 5 continents. It includes entries such as winning the technological war and formatting scene. Also, topics such as technology evangelism are intended to motivate the readers to be producers of technological projects for the church, not just consumers. Several people, including engineering students, professors, pastors, and others, have contributed with their devotionals. If you want to collaborate in this project, please send me your devotionals either in Spanish or in English to harveyalferez@um.edu.mx.
iShare fans, don't forget to register for our video camera giveaway on news.adventist.org/iShare. The contest deadline is January 31st. If you want to increase your chances of winning, we'll add your name to the drawing again every time you submit an iShare report. Thanks for sharing.
For decades, Adventist World Radio has reached remote villages with the church's message of hope. Now, Dowell Chow explains how the ministry is reaching people without access to radio.
Earlier this year, Adventist World Radio partnered with the ministry to reach the Huichol people of the Sierra Madre Mountains in Mexico. We started out with a project to get material for them to listen to the gospel in their own language by using a device that we can download material on, and they can listen at their own leisure in their own communities. This is the device we've been using. And it's prepared in a way that they can use it anytime because its solar panel is not operated by battery or anything else. We did the entire New Testament for them. Plus, we put 20 Bible studies in their own language, and we added the Seventh-day Adventist Spanish hymnal on it as well. You can listen to this and see how it would sound if you were in the Huichol Indian. You would hear it in your own language. This is the English version.
The Holy Bible, the New American Standard Version, the Old Testament, the Book of Genesis, Chapter 1.
Now, as you can see, with this as the means of reaching them, they can listen to the message without having to listen to a radio station or a TV station because they don't have electricity in those communities. Today, Adventist World Radio reaches out to people like them through different devices, bring the gospel of Jesus Christ, the saving grace of the message to these people who otherwise would never, ever hear the message.
Finally this week, we turn to Adventist historian David Trim to learn about the roots of medical missionary work in the South Pacific.
Welcome to This Week in Adventist History. On January 14 in 1960, Seventh-day Adventists first began mission work in the Central African Republic. In the subsequent 50 years, the church there has grown to a membership of just over 10,000. That's one for every 470 persons in the Central African Republic. On January 16 in 2010, Arthur Griffith, the first deaf Seventh-day Adventist pastor and founder of Adventist Deaf Ministry, died at age 89. Adventists were relatively quick to start a ministry for blind people, but we were slow to recognize the need to provide specialized ministries to hearing-impaired people. Griffith was a real pioneer. On January 17 in 1893, the celebrated mission ship Pitcairn sailed from San Francisco, beginning its second voyage. Among its passengers was a brother of John Harvey Kellogg, Dr. Merritt G. Kellogg, and he began Adventist medical missionary work in the South Pacific. On January 18 in 1930, Fred L. Pickett entered Cambodia, the first Seventh-day Adventist worker to enter that country. Adventist mission there has developed very slowly, partly due to many years of war and the terrible 1979 genocide. Today there are only some 5,500 church members in Cambodia, just one Adventist for every 2,700 Cambodians. And sometime during this week, 126 years ago, the first issue of the Bible Echo and Signs of the Times was published. It was the first Seventh-day Adventist journal published in Australia and is still published today simply as Signs of the Times. That was this week in Adventist history.
Thanks for watching Adventist News Network. Join us next week for more news from the headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
And in the meantime, look for us on Facebook. You can connect with other Adventists worldwide and find links to all of our stories, photos, and videos. Just visit Facebook/Adventist News.
And as always, you can visit news.adventist.org for daily news and videos. Until next week, God bless.